I remember preaching about that song once, and Carolyn McDade said she sat at her piano and she wrote that song like a prayer. And last night we were with the coming of age youth over at Pilgrim House with their mentors, and they asked a couple of us to reflect on why we come to church. And I was mentioning sort of this reality of a pause once a week and how helpful that is. But then the act of singing together and being in silence together and learning together and growing together and finding our own spiritual paths together just feels so profound. So thank you for singing that prayer today. So, Confessions of a Unitarian Universalist Minister. I am not a biblical scholar. It's a strange confession to make when people beyond UU congregations and some people within figure that since you're a minister and a pastor, you have a solid sense of the Bible and that you should be able to point out specific citations by heart, and not only point them out, but put them in a context, maybe interpret them, and then bring them into contemporary life. I was at a play the other night with my mother at the Jungle Theater along with some of her friends, and there was this apocalyptic undertone in languages reflected in the lines of the play, and it was from the book of Revelations. And afterwards, one of my mom's friends turned to me and said, "Hey, Pastor, what exact verse was that they kept sort of speaking of?" And fortunately, I've known Samuel for a while, and so I could respond with the confession that I was not raised with the Bible, and that 2 Older Testament classes and 2 New Testament classes do not a biblical scholar make. You can check in with Chad, who's in seminary now, and he will probably contest to the same reality. As a Unitarian Universalist minister, and likely the same is true for many of you, our sacred texts come from many sources, including my favorite, which is described at this point as the direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder confirmed by all cultures, which moves to a renewal of the spirit and openness to the forces that create and uphold life. I love that. I see and experience the sacred all the time in my daily living. I experience with interactions with all of you and out in the world, and quiet moments when my dog Reggie plops down on my lap in the morning, or when I walk out at this time of the year and I hear the bird song. I marvel at the sacredness of music, of the written word, both poetry and prose, of kindness and compassion and grief and joy. I feel a bit nervous when I'm confronted preaching on holidays like Easter. How can I do justice to a sacred story that still has so much power and purpose for so many Christians? I drove past the Catholic Church coming here this morning. That lot was packed and people were dressed to the nines. John Pavlovitz, a liberal Christian minister and writer, reminds us that this holiday may trigger spiritual muscle memory for you, reminding you of rituals that were at one time so meaningful, of buildings you once found an affinity in, of songs you once sang in the company of people you loved and felt loved by, maybe even of things you used to believe but no longer do. It may stir up in you emotions that you thought you'd long since moved beyond. You may find that a Sunday commemorating resurrection ironically feels like a day of mourning for your old church, or your younger optimism, or your former faith. He speaks of religious muscle memory that lives in us who were raised in Easter services traditions. One that tells people that they should be singing songs and saying prayers and feeling feelings, all of which they no longer have the slightest desire to do, he says. Those of you who've been at Michael Servetus for a long time probably only have a dim sense of these feelings, while others may still experience these or other responses to Easter morning more strongly. As I mentioned last night at the coming of age dinner with the youth, with the mentors, we had some wonderful conversations. And at one point, Polly referred to us as an eclectic bunch when it comes to religion. And you know, it's so funny, I have been struggling with trying to find a word other than pluralism, because that's, part of how we describe our faith. And I have literally tried to talk to people about how we're a pluralistic faith, and their eyes are just like, what? So Polly said, we're an eclectic faith, and it's like the light bulb went on. Like that might actually make sense to more people beyond these walls, because we are an eclectic faith. There's just folks who come from all different experiences and personal histories. And I hope that here we can honor all of them and each other. And we do that best when we speak about our own beliefs, particularly on days like today, versus tearing apart other people's beliefs. So we can connect with the story of Easter in several ways: through Jesus the man, which is how many of you regard Jesus, or through the stories of Jesus's death and resurrection as written in the Bible. Many of us connect through metaphor, which provides a place to jump off into images of rebirth and springtime and new opportunities and new life. David Weiss, who's right over here, you want to raise your hand? There we go. Who has recently started attending our services, is a prolific writer about his Christian faith journey and biblical interpretations. And he wrote an article several years ago called An Easter Evening Reflection: Ethics as Easter or the Virtuous Zombie. I appreciate his reflections and believe that they open a way for us to connect to the story of Jesus and see the timelessness of the very human story that it connects with today. So here are 3 points that I wanted to pull from David's piece and highlight today. First, he says, I see Jesus as a real historical person who was a mystic in his experiential sense of oneness with the God in the universe. As a prophet, and calling on his people to change their attitudes and behaviors, their ethics. A sage, a skilled teacher of his vision of renewed community, and as a healer, however you explain it. And I don't think you need to suspend the laws of nature to do so. Jesus, like others in history, could channel extraordinary healing power. His ministry was not focused on calling others to worship him. Rather, his teachings and healings, even the manner of his meals, which were aimed at announcing God's unconditional regard for the least of these, thereby inviting us to take God's perspective as our own by practicing deep, risky, and relentless compassion towards others. Second, he writes, Jesus' ministry was sufficiently vibrant that it came to pose a real threat to both the Jewish and the Roman power structures. Because both of these societies, cultures, like every society, culture, were built on a hierarchy of privileges and biases, of in-groups and outcast. And Jesus' model of community fundamentally challenged that. And then he wrote, his death, in which both Jewish and Roman leaders were complicit, was not, I repeat, was not in any way a sacrifice for sin. It was the unmistakable consequence of the threat that he posed to the status quo. It was a political elimination by the most brutal means possible. David, thank you for not mincing your words. The status quo was and is a dangerous system to be up against, especially when wealth and power fight to keep it intact. Many of you are lovers of poetry, and I find it more accessible, more accessible than others. But I always marvel at the human desire to put words to paper. It really is just magical to me. I love that people wrestle with images or feelings with a whisper or an inkling, an idea that must come out and be amplified. So as I prepared for today's service, I uncovered a couple poems, and as I sat to write my own words, I thought, well, why not just throw them in as well? So I thought I'd share a few poems with you on this Easter morning. The first one offers a doorway into the Easter story and metaphor. It's by Kathleen McTeague. She was is she still the director of the College of Social Justice? Okay, she is the executive director of the College for Social Justice, and she served as a parish minister for 25 years. Her poem is called Easter Resurrection. I'm going to put a little cough drop in just so that bad things can happen if my throat is not lubricated these days. So, the Easter story, as told in the Gospel of John, revolves around the experience of Mary, who gets up before dawn on the day after the Jewish Sabbath and goes alone to visit the tomb. Her beloved teacher has died a horrible death, and it was only by unexpected generosity of a wealthy man that Jesus was given even the small dignity of a real burial place instead of a pauper's grave. Because of Sabbath, his body had not been cleaned according to tradition, and Mary set out early with her herbs in order to do this last grieving service. But when she got to the tomb, she found that the stone blocking its entrance had already been rolled away, and his body was gone. It isn't hard to imagine her despair and anger at being robbed of even this last farewell. She ran to some of Jesus's other followers with the news, and they came back with her to see for themselves. They probably stood there for a while, arguing about what to do, but there was nothing to be done. Who would you complain to when you risked your life by even admitting to the authorities that you had known him? Filled with that bitter realization, they finally left him again. But Mary stayed, alone and weeping. Maybe something defiant crept in with her grief that made her brave enough to stay. And then she caught a movement out of the corner of her eye, and she turned to find somebody standing there. "Why are you crying?" he asked. "Who are you looking for?" Thinking he must be the gardener, she said carefully as she could, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I'll take care of it. I won't tell anyone. I'll just take his body and clean him up so he can rest in peace." Then Jesus, because of course it was Jesus standing there and she didn't recognize him, Jesus just called out her name, Mary. And she knew. And she said back to him, "Rabbi." For those of us, Kathleen says, who believe that Jesus was a human like us, the idea of this literal resurrection from death is a leap of faith we can't quite make. We know that when our bodies die, they die. We belong to the earth. And it's comforting and right to know that when we dissolve again into the that we will resolve again into the sweetness. But we can believe in Mary's resurrection. When Mary heard her name called, suddenly her eyes were opened to a new reality. She was called from the blindness of her grief and despair, and from within herself, she found a new way to see and to understand what had happened to her. Kathleen says, "I take that Easter story as truth. It points to the moments in every life when something within us is called out, called forth, called into a deeper understanding of our world." Easter raises the question in the bright opening of the earth and the turning season when life is pouring out all around us, what will we bring forth from within ourselves? It's a time that calls us to open our eyes in a new way, to not just see what we expect to see, but perhaps some bright and mysterious truth we could not fathom before, something completely new and unexpected. We are a troubled tribe, we human beings. The unfolding story of our time on earth is clouded with pain and cruelty, with missed opportunities, unthinkable heedlessness and indifference. But it's also marked by the bright notes of decency, kindness, freedom, and courage. Easter proclaims that we have a part to play in how the story unfolds if we're willing to wake up. We listen for what is calling us. And like Mary, when we hear our name, we answer, rising anew to meet the new life that will not stop calling our names. I'm assuming even if you're not biblical scholars, you're probably familiar with the Matthew 21 story where Jesus goes into the temple of God and he sees the money changers and people selling doves, and he flips over the tables in rage and he declares, "My house shall not be called the house of prayer, but my house shall be called the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. As we watch our country in division, maybe we can connect with the rage that Jesus demonstrated in the temple of God. Places that seem to be sacred institutions of democracy are becoming battlegrounds for religious and social agendas that are literally causing people to die. McTeague reminds us we are a troubled tribe, we human beings. This unfolding story of our time on earth is clouded with pain and cruelty, with missed opportunities, unthinkable heedlessness, and indifference. But it's also marked by the bright notes of decency and kindness and freedom and courage. Easter proclaims that we each have a part to play in how the story unfolds if we're willing to wake up. I don't know about you, but I certainly have had times when my eyes were open to a reality, when I've been called out of what she calls the blindness of her grief and despair. Last week, we talked about Theodore Parker, the Unitarian who wrote the phrase about the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. We recognize that that arc needs all of us. Somebody was saying in the circle afterwards to pull on that arch. It needs all of us to contribute in small and large ways if the vision of justice is to become a reality. Last Sunday, Byron over there by the computer asked us to write legislators in Nebraska who are attempting to filibuster the entire session to stop a bill that would ban or restrict access to health care for transgender youth. 26 people in this congregation responded to that call. NPR wrote 2 days ago that Nebraska lawmakers haven't passed a single bill this session. As a state lawmaker, Democrat State Senator Michaela Kavanaugh continues a week-long filibuster to protest over trans rights and vows to burn this session to the ground if she has to. I gotta say, we got a lot of responses I got a lot of responses when I wrote too. I don't know about you guys. It might have been AIDS, but still, they're hearing us. This week in Tennessee, 2 lawmakers were expelled from the state's legislature and another was stripped of all her committee assignments as a punitive power response towards 3 legislators who echoed the lively protest from Tennesseans who have had enough of the mass shootings and who had disrupted the chamber, trying to get others to move towards gun safety legislation. UU Minister Sarah York writes this piece titled "Rolling Away the Stone." In the tomb of the soul, we carry secrets, yearnings, pain, frustrations, loneliness, fears, regrets, worries. In the tomb of the soul, we take refuge from the world and its heaviness. In the tomb of the soul, we wrap ourselves in the security of darkness. Sometimes this is a comfort. Sometimes it is an escape. Sometimes it prepares us for experience. Sometimes it insulates us from life. Sometimes this tomb life gives us time to feel the pain of the world and reach out to heal others. But sometimes it numbs us and locks us up with our own concern. In this season, when light and darkness balance the day, we seek balance for ourselves. Grateful for the darkness that nourished us, we push away the stone and invite the light to awaken us to the possibilities for new life in ourselves and our world. For me, Easter is about metaphor and story. It's about human beings' desires for prophets and saviors and miracles and forgiveness. And it's about human violence and power and people turning their backs and remaining silent so they remain safe when power releases its vengeance. It's about grief and being called out of grief, awakened and called. So whether the Easter story bears any relevance for you or not, whether the enduring story of Jesus's life and death and resurrection resonate with you, or just hold a starting point for metaphors, I believe it's a helpful story to revisit. I left that coming of age dinner last night, and I remember the premise that underlines every time we gather our youth here for their faith statements. The premise is that on the day they share what they believe, it's what they believe on that day, just that day, and that their beliefs may and likely will change over time. That's kind of one of our UU beliefs. We have the freedom to embrace religious stories we once or still do hold as sacred, and then to revisit them over time. For years, you may outright reject them, and then later you may choose to enter into them with a different lens and heart. We are an eclectic bunch. And with that, we bring many perspectives to the journey of faith and ethical thinking that brings us together on Sunday mornings and other ways throughout the year. We have a rich array of sources that stir our minds and hearts and spirits in this very human story we call life. I wish you all a reflective Easter, one where you take a moment to listen to what is calling you and what might be reborn or restored within you, so that you and we and everyone might live more fully. May it be so. Amen. You can stand, and we're going to sing Spirit of Life once again. I think just once is good. Okay.
As Laura mentioned a minute ago, last week she preached about Unitarian minister Theodore Parker. And these are his words found in the back of the gray hymnal. It's reading number 683 for those who are interested. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple, all space. Its shrine, the good heart. Its creed, all truth. Its ritual, works of love, its profession of faith, divine living. We often speak about wanting this congregation to be a beacon of liberal faith in the northern suburbs. We all keep that vision alive by supporting the work of the congregation with time, talent, and financial gifts. This is the time in the service where we practice what Parker called divine living in the form of financial generosity. Any amount of giving is greatly appreciated. We will pass the basket here at the Fridley Community Center, and if you are either here or on Zoom and would like to give online, we will share the screen instructions for you to do that.
Only that paper. Sure. I didn't know whether that's what you're at.
So many of you know, I hope, but if not, here's your notice. Reverend Laura will begin a 4-month sabbatical starting on April 15th, which means today is her last Sunday with us until she returns in August. So we want to wish Laura a fulfilling and rejuvenating sabbatical experience and offer blessings to each other. And we'll be sharing slides in a moment for you to join in. It's going to end up being sort of a little bit of a conversation almost between Laura and the congregation. So you begin, actually.
I'm thankful for my ministry with you and the gift of this opportunity you have given me for spiritual and professional replenishment.
We are glad to be able to offer you this time for rest, refreshment, and renewal. Reverend Laura has been working with staff, with Chad, our commissioned lay minister, and with various individual congregants to identify who will take care of a multitude of tasks while she is away. I'm grateful for the generosity of staff to shift the boundaries of their usual job descriptions, for Chad's generosity in adding a bit more to his role as lay minister, and for the generosity of each congregant who could say yes to ensure that some particular thing will get done while Reverend Laura is gone. So first, I'll have a little response from this smaller group: Colleen, Reverend Diana, Bruce, Chad, and all who have a special role while Reverend Laura is away. May your hearts be lifted by our gratitude. And then you can share the slides if they're not already, and staff and Chad and those who are going to do something for us can respond here.
And that's probably a lot more of you than you.
Yeah, it may be the whole it may be
yeah.
the whole congregation at this point, but I did want to recognize that there are a few who are doing some extra things. So we will be flexible and create as we fit new tasks into our routines. We will be patient with each other and kind to ourselves when unforeseen situations arise.
Just to break from script for a second, I was meeting with Colleen and she said, if I make a mistake when you're gone, and I said, stop. When you make a mistake when I'm gone, you will be kind to yourself. So yes, thank you, you guys. Since I'm taking time away from direct ministry, I ask that you embrace the staff and the board leadership in my absence and encourage and support each other while I'm away.
Congregation, join in. We will hold steady to our ministry with each other and to our mission. We will cherish our diversity, warmly receive each visitor, and extend respect and compassion to all.
I know you will, because I've witnessed your great gifts of love and care.
May you be filled with lightness and love as you study, rejoice in new learnings, and journey inward for fresh insights and renewal. May you experience the gift of spiritual growth on your journey.
May you, too, grow in new ways. May you discover new strengths, connections, and purpose with each other.
We send you with our blessing. We will keep you in our hearts, knowing that you are part of us and we part of you. We trust that you'll return recharged, energized for our shared ministry.
I will hold tight to your blessings. I will keep you in my heart. I look forward to my return and sharing what we've all experienced during our time apart.
May we be grounded in our values of mindful interdependence, authentic curiosity, and courageous love. May our hearts and minds be open to growth and discovery. Reverend Laura, as you leave, let our love be the gentle current supporting you, moving you to new places, and bringing you home to us again. Amen, and blessed be. And now, I do have a small gift from the congregation. All right, so I didn't prepare for this part of being able to be heard.
Do you want me to move that away?
So we wanted to send you off with a lighthearted way to be reminded of our care and support. So what have we created? Do you want to guess? Do you have any idea?
It looks like a surprise box.
It
I
is
don't
a
know, what
surprise
is it?
box, okay. So this,
Oh, it's, oh, that's,
this is a one-of-a-kind MSUS puzzle for you.
oh, yeah.
Yesterday afternoon, this bag had 64 puzzle pieces, but more have been added since then. Probably maybe 20 more, I don't know.
Do you think they fit together?
So they've each been decorated by MSUS congregants and even a few folks from beyond the congregation. We have 2 that even came from South Carolina.
Aw.
So each piece has been decorated with uplifting, inspiring, or simply joyful words or images. So it is not one of those super challenging puzzles. Most of the pieces are a standalone design, and each piece fits into any other piece. So you can assemble it into a different collage every time, using as many or few pieces as you wish. Some of the pieces are decorated on both sides, so be sure to flip them over.
All right.
I've seen this, nobody else has, but we're gonna put a picture up here in a second. But I think you're gonna really be delighted with the variety of thoughtful and whimsical designs and messages, and that you'll also love knowing that these were decorated by all ages, by people you see often here on Sundays, by folks who connect in other ways than Sunday services. So Byron, you could share the next slide to give people a little taste of what it looks like possibly put
Yeah.
together. And
Thank
you
you.
go.
Awesome.